For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a celebratory afternoon in 2003, 26-year-old Priya Sethi, a newlywed, stood on Victory Lane at Daytona International Speedway in Daytona Beach, Florida. After cherished wedding photos, she stepped away to adjust her flowing veil. She never returned. Despite an extensive, desperate investigation that swept across the sprawling Speedway complex and beyond, Priya Sethi vanished without a trace, leaving behind a bewildered husband and a shattered dream. For 12 agonizing years, her family lived with immeasurable uncertainty, haunted by unanswered questions and clinging to a fading hope. Then, in 2015, a startling discovery was made deep within the track's hidden service tunnels, a fragile piece of evidence that would finally begin to unravel the mystery. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Priya Sethi. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. The Florida sun beat down on Daytona Beach on a warm Saturday in 2003, a day typically associated with roaring engines and cheering crowds at the International Speedway. But on this particular afternoon, the infield of the iconic track hosted a different kind of celebration, a wedding. The air hummed not with the thrum of race cars, but with laughter, music, and the joyful murmur of family and friends gathered to witness a union. At the heart of this festivity was Priya Sethi, a vibrant 26-year-old, radiant in her white gown and delicate veil. She had just exchanged vows, stepping into a future brimming with possibility and love, her dreams seemingly laid out before her on the hallowed grounds of Daytona. Following the ceremony, the wedding party made its way to the Speedway's famed Victory Lane deck, a place usually reserved for triumphant drivers, now transformed into a picturesque backdrop for photographs. Priya, beaming, stood beside her new husband, surrounded by loved ones, capturing what appeared to be perfect, indelible memories. The photographer called for a few more shots, but Priya paused, her hand rising to her headpiece. She announced she needed to briefly step away, just to fix the veil, a common enough adjustment on a day filled with movement and excitement. She indicated she would be back in a moment, disappearing from the Victory Lane deck and heading towards a quieter area nearby, a routine act that would soon become the focal point of a baffling mystery. Minutes stretched into a quarter hour, then 20 minutes. Her husband, then her bridesmaids began to glance around, a flicker of concern replacing their earlier merriment. The initial, casual inquiries turned into more urgent calls for her name. The celebration began to unravel as the realization dawned. Priya Sethi had not returned. A systematic search, initially polite and then increasingly frantic, swept through the immediate vicinity of the Victory Lane. Guests fanned out, calling her name, their voices laced with a growing sense of dread. The joyous atmosphere of a wedding day at Daytona Speedway had, in an instant, dissolved into an unsettling void, leaving only confusion and a chilling silence where a bride had just been. The initial, desperate search for Priya Sethi quickly expanded beyond the Victory Lane deck. Wedding guests and Speedway staff, their faces etched with growing alarm, scoured the nearby hospitality suites, concession stands, and spectator areas. They checked restrooms, gift shops, and any alcove where a person might momentarily retreat. The vastness of the Daytona International Speedway, usually a source of awe, now felt like an overwhelming, labyrinthine space, swallowing a young woman whole. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the track, the frantic personal search transitioned into a more organized, official response. Local law enforcement, alongside Daytona Speedway's own security personnel, were swiftly notified. The initial reports described a missing person, but the unusual circumstances, a bride vanishing from a high-profile, ostensibly secure location, lent the incident an immediate gravity. Security Chief Dana Kapoor, a veteran of the Speedway's complex operations, took charge of the on-site investigation, coordinating with the arriving police detectives. The first hours were a whirlwind of activity: interviews with the stunned wedding party, systematic sweeps of the infield, and a review of any available security footage from the more public areas. Questions immediately arose, each more troubling than the last. Had Priya simply become disoriented in the unfamiliar layout of the Speedway? Was it a tragic accident, perhaps a fall or a sudden illness? Or was something far more sinister at play? Foul play, initially a whispered fear, began to gain traction as no innocent explanation presented itself. Among those questioned extensively was Nalan Franks, the best man who had been standing near Priya moments before her disappearance. His testimony, like that of the other wedding guests, offered no clear insight, only a shared bewilderment and the chilling detail of Priya's casual announcement to fix the veil before she vanished. Investigators meticulously canvassed every inch of the accessible infield. They reviewed gate logs, checked perimeter fences, and interviewed every vendor and staff member working that day. Yet, the search yielded nothing. There were no discarded personal items, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses who had seen Priya after she left the Victory Lane deck. The security cameras in the immediate vicinity of her disappearance offered no definitive images, capturing only the celebratory chaos of the wedding party. As the night deepened over Daytona, the absence of any tangible clue became the most unsettling fact. Priya Sethi had simply evaporated, leaving behind only her stunned wedding guests and a growing, impenetrable silence. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the initial fervor surrounding Priya Sethi's disappearance inevitably began to wane. The vast resources poured into the immediate search, the tireless questioning of every possible witness, and the exhaustive forensic analysis of the Victory Lane area gradually yielded nothing. Investigators had chased down every tip, however speculative, and re-interviewed the wedding party countless times, yet the case remained stubbornly devoid of any concrete leads. The police press conferences grew less frequent. The media's intense focus shifted to other unfolding tragedies, and the once urgent calls for public assistance faded into a quiet, frustrating silence. The active investigation, once a whirlwind of activity, slowly transitioned into the grim reality of a cold case. For Priya's family and friends, however, the passage of time brought no solace, only a deepening chasm of grief and uncertainty. Her newlywed husband, left to grapple with a future that had vanished as abruptly as his bride, faced an unimaginable void. Birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays became painful reminders of her absence, each passing year adding another layer of despair. Nalan Franks, the best man, and security chief Dana Kapoor, both intimately involved in the initial, fruitless search, carried the weight of the unsolved mystery, forever haunted by the events of that fateful day at the Speedway. The hope that had flickered in the early days, fueled by the sheer desperation to find her, slowly extinguished, replaced by a gnawing, persistent ache. 12 years passed without a single breakthrough. A decade and 2 years during which Priya Sethi remained a ghost, her story an unfinished tragedy. Children were born and grew into young adults. The world outside Daytona Speedway continued its relentless march forward. Yet within the annals of law enforcement, Priya's file remained open, a chilling testament to an unsolved enigma. Periodically, the case would be revisited by a fresh set of eyes, a cold case unit hoping new technologies or a different perspective might unearth what had been missed. These reviews, often spurred by internal protocols or the persistent pleas of Priya's family, involved re-examining old reports, rescanning maps of the Speedway, and re-listening to the testimonies of that bewildering day in 2003. Each time the process concluded with the same frustrating outcome: no new evidence, no fresh witnesses, no discernible path forward. The sprawling complex of the Daytona International Speedway, a place of speed and triumph, continued to hold its secrets, keeping Priya Sethai's fate locked away in its vast, silent infrastructure. 12 years had passed since Priya Sethai vanished, a period long enough for the initial shock to calcify into a dull, persistent ache for her loved ones, and for her case to settle deep within the archives of unsolved mysteries. The Daytona International Speedway, a place of constant evolution and maintenance, continued its operations, its intricate network of tunnels and service routes largely unseen by the public eye. It was within this forgotten subterranean world, far from the roar of engines and the celebratory atmosphere of Victory Lane, that a crucial and utterly unexpected discovery would finally be made. In the late autumn of 2015, a routine inspection crew was conducting a thorough check of the Speedway's extensive, rarely accessed service tunnels beneath the pit area. These passages, dark and humid, were a maze of conduits, wiring, and structural supports, essential to the track's functioning but seldom traversed by human eyes. One technician, meticulously examining a section of aging wire mesh that guarded an obscure ventilation shaft, noticed an anomaly. Snagged tightly on a rusty barb, fluttering almost imperceptibly in the stale air current, was a small, delicate piece of fabric. It was off-white, translucent, and clearly torn from a larger garment. The technician, accustomed to finding discarded debris, initially paid it little mind. But as he reached to dislodge it, a faint, intricate pattern became visible, and the texture felt distinctly unlike any industrial material. Closer inspection revealed it to be a strip of fine tulle, intricately embroidered along one edge, unmistakably a fragment of a bridal veil. The sudden, chilling realization that this was not mere refuse but a potential clue in a long-dormant, missing person case sent a jolt through the crew. This was no ordinary piece of fabric. Its presence in such an obscure, restricted location, 12 years after a bride vanished from the Speedway, screamed of significance. News of the find immediately reached the Daytona Beach Police Department, igniting a flicker of hope that had been all but extinguished. After more than a decade of silence, a tangible piece of evidence directly linked to Priya Sethai had finally surfaced. The torn veil strip, small and fragile, represented the first concrete lead since the day she disappeared. It was a stark, almost unbelievable, development that promised to shatter the impenetrable silence surrounding her fate, breathing new life into a cold case that had haunted investigators and her family for far too long. The desolate service tunnel, once merely a passage for maintenance, now held the potential key to unlocking a 12-year-old mystery. The torn veil strip, a fragile wisp of tulle, was immediately treated as an invaluable piece of evidence, carefully collected and transported to the state forensic laboratory. Forensic scientists meticulously cataloged the delicate fabric, searching for microscopic fibers, trace DNA, or any particulate matter that might adhere to its surface. Every thread, every stitch, every potential stain became a focal point in the revived investigation. The initial analysis focused on identifying the specific material and confirming its origin as part of a bridal veil, a detail that quickly established its direct link to Priya Sethai. Simultaneously, a specialized team of investigators, equipped with advanced lighting and mapping tools, descended into the dark, humid service tunnel where the veil had been discovered. This was no casual inspection. It was a forensic sweep of an environment that had remained largely undisturbed for over a decade. Every inch of the passage, from its concrete floor to its high ceiling, was scrutinized. They mapped its labyrinthine layout, noting all access points, potential entry and exit routes, and any other anomalies. The wire mesh itself, the very point where the veil was snagged, underwent intense examination for additional fibers, skin cells, or any other microscopic clues that might have been left behind. The goal was not merely to understand how the veil got there, but to reconstruct the circumstances of its arrival. The discovery necessitated a complete reevaluation of every piece of original evidence, every witness statement, and every security log from that bewildering day in 2003. Detectives revisited the testimonies of Nolan Franks and security chief Dana Kapoor, comparing their initial recollections against the stark reality of the veil's discovery. Every report, once considered a dead end, was now re-examined through the prism of this new, tangible clue. The cold case team meticulously cross-referenced details, searching for any overlooked mention of maintenance work, unusual activity, or personnel access to the service tunnels around the time of Priya's disappearance. The veil's location within a restricted service tunnel immediately introduced a fresh, unsettling set of questions. How did a bridal veil, worn by Priya Sethai on her wedding day, come to be snagged deep within such an obscure, inaccessible part of the Speedway's infrastructure 12 years later? Was she coerced into this hidden network, or did she enter voluntarily, somehow disoriented? If she was in the tunnel, was she alive when the veil tore? And crucially, who had access to these clandestine passages, and why would they be there with a newlywed bride? The veil, while a breakthrough, deepened the mystery even as it promised answers, shifting the focus from a simple disappearance to a potential crime orchestrated within the very heart of the Speedway. The meticulous forensic examination of the torn veil strip yielded a critical breakthrough, 12 years after Priya Sethai vanished. Microscopic analysis of the delicate tool revealed not only its bridal origin, but also the presence of a specific track compound. This unique blend of rubber and asphalt particulate, often found adhering to racing tires and vehicle undercarriages, was conclusively matched to samples collected from the Daytona International Speedway's track surface. More precisely, the compound on the veil corresponded to residue from a high-friction night test session conducted shortly after the wedding in 2003. This forensic revelation immediately redirected the cold case investigation. No longer were detectives merely sifting through old reports. They were now tracing a specific event, a clandestine activity that had occurred within the Speedway's otherwise closed environment. The team initiated an exhaustive data mining operation, delving into the Speedway's vast archives. They scrutinized every maintenance log, personnel roster, and track activity report from the weeks surrounding Priya's disappearance and the identified night test session. Every entry, every shift change, and every vehicle movement was cross-referenced, searching for any anomaly. It was within this meticulous digital excavation that a crucial breadcrumb trail began to emerge. Radio logs, initially deemed irrelevant in the absence of a crime scene, revealed a series of unusual communications during the timeframe of the night test session. Simultaneously, access card pings from restricted service gates and garage areas, routes not typically used during public events, showed a pattern of entries and exits. These digital records, when overlaid, painted a chilling picture: a controlled backroute escort through the Speedway's garages and into the very network of service tunnels where the veil had been found. The timing of these digital events aligned suspiciously with the night test session and the subsequent discovery of the track compound on the tool. Among the personnel whose access card pings and radio communication stood out during this specific timeframe was a crew tire tech known as Biscuit Alvarez. His role granted him extensive access to various parts of the Speedway, including the pit and garage areas, often outside of regular operating hours, and he possessed intimate knowledge of the track's intricate, less-traveled routes. The confluence of the forensic evidence from the veil and the digital records from the Speedway's internal systems provided the missing link, transforming Priya Sethai's disappearance from an unsolvable mystery into a crime with a discernible timeline and potentially an identifiable perpetrator. The veil had not merely been found. It had been placed or discarded during a specific, unauthorized movement through the Speedway's hidden arteries, suggesting a deliberate act concealed by the vastness of the facility. The convergence of forensic evidence from Priya Sethai's veil and the intricate digital footprints left within the Speedway systems inexorably pointed to one individual, Biscuit Alvarez. His access card history showed unauthorized entries into restricted service areas and tunnels during the precise timeframe of the night test session, and his radio logs contained cryptic, unscheduled communications that hinted at clandestine activity. Confronted with the irrefutable evidence, Alvarez, initially defiant, eventually broke under the weight of the facts. The full, horrifying truth of Priya's disappearance began to emerge, pieced together from his fragmented admissions and the silent testimony of the wreck. Overt veil. On that fateful wedding day in 2003, as Priya Sethi stepped away from the Victory Lane deck to adjust her veil, she was intercepted. Alvarez, lurking in a dimly lit service corridor, had observed the wedding party, noting the bride's brief, solitary moment. Using his intimate knowledge of the Speedway's hidden passages, he lured or forced Priya into a secluded service tunnel, the very network where her veil would be discovered 12 years later. It was during this clandestine journey through the dark, confined spaces that the delicate tool, snagged on the wire mesh, tore away, a silent witness to her struggle and forced transit. The backroute escort, initially a vague digital trace, was now understood as the mechanism of her abduction, a desperate journey into the unknown from which she would never return. Her ultimate fate, though never fully detailed by Alvarez, was sealed within the Speedway's depths, her life tragically cut short. Alvarez's arrest brought a harrowing conclusion to the 12-year mystery. Though Priya's body was never recovered, the weight of the evidence and his admissions led to charges and, ultimately, a conviction for her abduction and presumed death. For Nalin Franks, the best man who had lived with the torment of that day, and security chief Dana Kapoor, who had overseen the initial, fruitless search, the resolution offered a complex mix of relief and profound sorrow. The Speedway, once a symbol of celebration, now carried the indelible mark of a tragedy finally understood. Most significantly, for Priya's family, the truth, however painful, provided a measure of closure after more than a decade of agonizing uncertainty. The confirmation of her fate, though devastating, allowed them to begin the long, arduous process of grief, no longer trapped in the limbo of the unknown. Priya Sethi's case became a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk even in seemingly secure environments. It underscored the critical importance of forensic persistence and the power of digital archaeology in solving cold cases. The torn veil, a forgotten scrap of fabric, had lain dormant for years, only to become the linchpin that unraveled a decades-old enigma. Her story stands as a testament to the unwavering dedication of investigators who refuse to let a case die, and to the enduring hope that even the smallest, most overlooked clue can eventually lead to justice, offering answers where only silence once reigned.